the Apostle Peter, one of Jesus' devoted apostles, who were the disciples with him in life. He learned a lot, changed a lot, became the devoted pastor and epistle writer we find here. But the epistle has had this constant theme. And as I teach from this passage this morning, you're not going to hear new things that we haven't already touched on in the book of 1 Peter. In fact, he's going to say things that, if this sermon sounds repetitious of prior sermons, that's not me, I'll pass that criticism back onto Peter, because he keeps writing in these cyclical, repetitive ways. I think he knows that you and I take a little bit to learn lessons. And even longer to actually start implementing it into our life. So he says this again, what he's been saying over and over, which is that it is better to suffer for righteousness' sake than to sin. This has been his constant theme throughout the whole epistle. You remember chapter 1, 2, 3. What he's been saying is this double prong approach. If you're going to be living, and of course his people that he was writing to were living under some persecution, the culture and the atmosphere was coming up against Christians, their righteous way of living, the way they wouldn't join in our pagan worship in Rome and the empire. And more so in the next coming years, the enormous empire-wide spread, the hunt for Christians that will result in them being thrown up on crosses and burned alive in Rome, that was all coming very, very shortly. Peter could feel the temperature rising against Christianity in the gospel as it spread. He writes this to his disciples. But to us as well, you might find that as you preach the gospel, live consistently as a Christian, we receive the pushback and persecution of the world. Into that circumstance, God gives us the epistle of 1 Peter so that we can know how to live well and suffer well at the hand of persecutors, how we can suffer well through this life which is marred and all over it is the stain of suffering, from sickness to relational ill health to bad mental health, or to business and financial dealings that go wrong. Whatever it is, we suffer. And one of the main themes of 1 Peter is the suffering at the hand of persecutors. So his two-pronged approach has been, as you come to suffering in this life at the hands of wicked men, look to Christ, who has earned and achieved for you a living hope which is sure, certain, undefilable, untouched in heaven for us. That's our inheritance, our future, it's glorious. Amen? Chapter 1 talks all about the glory of what Christ has accomplished. And then he starts saying, but as he has died for us, raised again, and achieved for us a living hope, there is also, in his life lived, an example for us. We say it's dead religion that simply offers Jesus as an example for you to try and copy. You'll fail every time, become depressed or proud, and maybe even neglect the whole of this Christian religion as powerless. And it is powerless if all it is an example. But it's all. It's an example from the God-man who has achieved the very thing we cannot achieve. And has gone into heaven and achieved for us that salvation. That's been Peter's double-pronged approach. We have an example in Christ, but we have a sure living hope that gives us assurance and that outlasts all the fear that comes from man because of what he's done. Well, today, read with me verses 1 to 6 of chapter 4. He'll say nothing new, but drive home his point even harder than he has before, with a very heavy hammer onto this. He says this in verse 1. I hope that you can read it in your own Bible in front of you. Since therefore Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves with the same way of thinking, for whoever has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, so as to live for the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for human passions, but for the will of God. For the time that is past suffices for doing what the Gentiles want to do, living in sensuality, passions, drunkenness, orgies, drinking parties, and lawless idolatry. With respect to this, they're surprised when you don't join them in the same flood of debauchery, and they malign you. But they will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. But this is why the gospel was preached even to those who are dead, that though judged in the flesh the way people are, they might live in the spirit the way God does. And may God bless to us this morning the explanation and application of his dear and precious infallible word to us. Peter's not saying anything new here. He said it over and over again throughout the first 3 chapters. But he's putting his foot in the ground and saying, if you have been hearing and intellectually assenting and agreeing with all that has been said through the first 3 chapters, and I encourage you to go and listen to the sermons on YouTube from that. But if you've been sitting and nodding and agreeing and taking those notes, there is a colossal difference between somebody who does that and somebody who has actually gone out into your workplace, neighborhood, family, other countries, and actually suffered for the cause of Christ. Because suffering is not something we go out to cause or we seek for it, but it's something that inevitably comes across our path if you're a consistent Christian. As we've reminded ourselves, Paul says, everyone, I looked it up in the Greek, that means everyone who wants to live for Christ will face persecution. And Peter is simply saying today, he said, if you have actually taken to heart, if you have actually heard, not just with the mind, but in your spirit, if the Holy Spirit has applied this truth to you, this is what your life will look like. He's not going to reteach us new things. He's simply begging the question, has the truth of the first 3 chapters of the glorious life of Christ and his example for us, has it actually hit the road in your life and caused change? Caused an actual lack of fear of what men would say, as we've just sung. Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. If this has actually happened in your life, then Peter would say that you've heard it. You've actually been someone who has repented of sin. But if not, we have to ask ourselves whether or not we find ourselves in right standing with God. Here's how he says it. I'll introduce with verse 1. He says, since therefore Christ suffered in the flesh. Now this has been a common theme. We know how to suffer in the flesh because we see how Christ has suffered in the flesh. So we can look back up into verse 18 where he reminds us in chapter 3, Christ also suffered. And then it says that he was put to death in the flesh. Or over in chapter 2, we were told how he was, though he committed no sin, he was reviled and he suffered, but he did not threaten. He bore our sins in his body on the tree. Or up a little bit there, where we're told in verse 21 to suffer in chapter 2. To this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example that you might follow in his footsteps. We're told back over in chapter 1 in verse 20 that he was foreknown before the foundation of the world to be crucified. In verse 19 that he was given as a lamb with precious blood sprinkled with, and he had no blemish or spot. Back in chapter 1 we were told in verse 13 to prepare your minds for action. And as he goes on to say, it's because there's suffering to be had. Over and over again, Peter is saying, look at the suffering of Christ. And so he said again, since Christ suffered, right, the high and holy one suffered, we have no excuse. No servant is greater than his master. We learned that last week. Since Christ suffered, arm yourselves with the same thinking. As the ESV says, arm yourselves in the same way of thinking. What is the way of thinking that Peter has been trying to drive home to us, which Jesus also embodied? What is that way of thinking? It's a very phrase that has been using in a thematic way over and over again. If you look at verse 17, it is of chapter 3. It is better to suffer for doing good if that should be God's will. It is better to suffer for doing good if that should be God's will. Or up in verse 14 of chapter 3. Even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Or back in chapter 2, he continued in verse 23. He continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. This is the mindset that preserved Christ through the suffering all of his life long, not just on the cross, but all the life long, being rejected by his family, persecuted by his friends, taken to a cliff to be thrown off, people picking up stones ready to throw it at him. What preserved him and his zeal for the glory of God through all of those things? It was the mindset that it is better to suffer for righteousness' sake than to sin. So we're not going really complex today. I'm just asking you, commanding you with the apostolic authority that Peter says it, arm yourself with this way of thinking. Become a disciple who does not just learn, does not just think, does not just agree to a biblical sermon and tick off the exposition, but actually decide, plant your foot in the ground and decide, I believe down to my core that it is better to live for Christ and suffer for righteousness than to sin. That is what preserved Christ. That is what will preserve us. So he says, and this is the way that Peter says it, so dogmatically, so straightforward. Here's that bold and almost insulting straightforwardness of Peter that we met in the Gospels, who even had the audacity to rebuke Jesus Christ. Well, Christ has put him in his place, but he will rebuke us. Peter says boldly in the last half of verse 1, since Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourself with the same way of thinking, because whoever has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. Whoever has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. Now, what he means here is not that if you go through some portion of suffering, like some Christians will teach us, then you can arrive at some kind of Christian experience where you no longer have sin. It's all been washed out of you by suffering. We learned that back in chapter 1. That as we go through trials, it's like fire to gold and it purifies us. And you go through enough, you can arrive at a sinless state of perfection. I've been hearing what you're saying. I haven't actually arrived at that. I just need to talk down that rumor at the moment. I haven't got there. No one can, no one will. Even Paul didn't. Only Jesus was there. We get that now. What he's meaning is that the Christian, if you could look at a Christian who has been so decidedly for Christ, who has so set in his mind that it is better, or her mind, that it is better to live for righteousness' sake and suffer than to sin, if somebody believes that so much and they walk forward as persecution is heaped on them and as suffering comes to them, as their faith makes it through that, and they only become more bold and more zealous for the cause of Christ and righteousness, that person is somebody whose lifestyle has truly turned around from and left their sin. It's the great test that we would say, I love Christ, I love his salvation, the gospel that we learned in those first couple of chapters, just glorious, amazing, perfect, free forgiveness by the grace of God. But if that faith in you goes through the fire that we learned about as a trial in chapter 1, and the faith burns away, does not last, even through the petty insults of petty humans who have no power other than just to kill us, and then we go to God who can kill both body and soul. If that faith doesn't last it through that, it is not a true faith. And this doesn't mean that even like Peter, we don't fail at one time. You remember his 3 denials of Christ. It doesn't mean that there's one chance, and if you fail, you're gone out of the kingdom. But his faith came back from that and even took him, in the end of his life, to the point of crucifixion upside down next to his wife at the hand of Nero. He's telling us what he has learned, which is that if my faith had not been strengthened by that failure, if I had continued on in denying Christ when the persecution rose, if I had kept on drawing back from speaking about righteousness and sin and judgment, if I had kept on drawing back as a pattern in my life from pushing forward for righteousness and Christ's sake despite suffering, then I cannot be once spoken of as having ceased from sin. We need to realize that if we are unwilling to walk the path of persecution, Peter tells us with apostolic authority, it's because there's unrepentant sin in your life. You have not truly come to Christ. Maybe you are a true Christian, but there is sin that you're unwilling to deal with, and so you lack the power to face the persecution. But even more seriously so, it could very likely be that we sit here in these pews and we nod our head to the Bible and we agree with Peter, but all the while our hearts are still wrapped up in and under the slavery of sin. And that is why we have no power to face the world and its arms. So he says, he who lives the life of suffering in the flesh is the one who has ceased from their sin, so as Why do we cease from sin so as to live the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for human passions, but for the will of God? Now, we'll go into the specifics of what he's going to talk about in all these ways, but this is his thing. Have you, Christian, have you truly and really decided, not in a theological sense, not because you've written a treatise on it or read 5 books about it, but have you in your life and in your heart before God and despite the rest of the world, have you decided that I will live the rest of my life in this fleshly body for the rest of this time on earth? I will live it for the will of God and not my sinful flesh. And if you have truly decided that, then you will walk through those deep, deep waters and God will sustain you. You will walk through those fiery trials and God will preserve you. He will do that. This is the promise of Peter, and this is the challenge of him this morning. We who are willing to suffer are the ones who have truly repented. Who are those who have truly repented? Those who are willing to suffer for the cause of Christ, so as to live the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for human passions, but for the will of God. I've got a few points here that Peter sort of touches on. That is a decided disciple who has set and armed themselves with this way of thinking. If you truly believe it's better to suffer for righteousness' sake than to sin, then we will, number one, refuse to take part in human passions. We regret rather than dream about our past sin. And we receive the reviling and resign judgment to God. You'll see this as we work through the passage. So look at verse 3 with me. You'll see a bit of Peter's sarcasm that he's so famous for in the Gospels. The time that is past suffices for doing what the Gentiles want to do. He's just said it. If you're a true Christian, decided even to the point of going through suffering, then you're one who will not live for human passions, because the time that has passed, your pre-conversion life, all that in the past, that was enough time to rebel against God and the sinful filth of the Gentiles. He's using the word Gentiles to mean all the non-Christians, the non-spiritual Jews. The Gentiles were the pagans back then who were identified and they could be seen. One of their traits was just the lawless sin that they would run headlong into, which Peter says in a short few verses, he calls a flood of debauchery. Just this unrestrained run towards all the sin that one can possibly do. And Peter looks back on that time and he says to you and I, do you think that was enough time that you spent in that? Was it? I think I look back and it's kind of like a sarcastic teacher who will look at the talking student at the back of the room. Oh, sorry, Tom. I'll wait until you finish. Are you done talking? I don't want to interrupt your conversation. Was it just me that got that in high school? I know some of you. When they say that, they're not really asking, is that enough time? Do you want actually to set apart some of my curriculum time so that you can keep on talking? What they're doing is playing on the sarcasm to say, you're on my time, that's enough, stop or leave. And Peter's sort of doing the same thing. He says, as you think of your past in sin, was that enough? Can we just agree that was probably enough of all of that? It filled you up, you were happy with how much you had, and now you're done? There's two things that I think we do wrong when we look back on our pre-conversion life or all of the sin that enslaved us before becoming a Christian. I think that both of these are sinful, though both of them tempt us. One way is to look back on your pre-conversion life, the life that you lived in sin, and you look back on it and just wish, and we've all been there. We wonder why when God designed salvation and redemption and regeneration in the Holy Spirit, why He didn't, when He gave us a new heart, remove our memories of all of that sin. Why did He not wipe my mind, give me a clean slate for Christ now? I can't unsee the pictures. I can't unremember what I did. My hands still drip. My dreams of blood red because of the things that I did. We have real guilt, real disastrous, destructive memories of what happened. And we ask, why didn't God just remove those memories? Maybe you, like me, in my early Christian years, prayed that God would just wipe that away so that I wouldn't have a recollection of the wicked things I did in my heart, mind, computer, flesh. I wish I had that. Well, the second way we can sin as we look back on our pre-conversion life is to look backward and just remember the pleasures that sin offers us. And we, like the Israelites in the desert, having been saved from slavery in Egypt, we look back and just remember the tasty food we had in Egypt. Just remember how they had all the good boiled vegetables, and here we're just eating the miraculous bread from heaven. And as they look back and remember the pleasures, they forget the whips that tore apart the flesh on their back, and the swords that killed their children, and the alligators that bit apart their newborn infants at the command of Pharaoh. They forget all that and just remember the pleasures of the food back there, and wish that they could go back just for a taste, forgetting that to show their face back there again would mean slavery and death. But we do that. We look back and we just get bored with it. With this Sunday morning, I could be out with my friends doing something better than this. This Friday night, I could be out with my friends doing something better than this. We look back and remember what we used to revel in. What we used to dip our feet into. We just want to go back and take another taste. Both of these, of course, are a sinful way to remember our pre-Christ life. We shouldn't wish that the memories go away, because it's by those very memories of our prior sin, just like God left and intentionally reminded the Israelites of their slavery life. It's those memories of our prior sin and the fullness of its debauchery that reminds us day by day of the grace that God really has poured out on us. It's those memories of the filth of sin that make the blemish, the pure, unblemished blood of Christ look so much more glorious. It's those guilty feelings which drive us to the foot of the cross and keep us from being proud. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we don't grow that taste for the old slavery that we used to enjoy. Peter says, look back on that life, and friends, it was enough. That pastime was sufficient for doing all that the Gentiles want to do and what you are doing, because one sin is too many. The lifetime that you spent in it was far too much. It's enough. Don't go back. He talks specifically about living in sensuality. That following of all the lusts of the flesh. In particular, it talks about that maybe your version says licentiousness. It's that chasing after violence and sexual immorality. He says the passions, not things that people get excited about or passionate about, but those passions, as he said in prior chapters, being the human lusts of the flesh. He names also, I don't want you to see this as a list to shake your head at. I want you to see this as a record of even your own sin. How we have committed these things. Sensuality, passions, drunkenness, orgies, drinking parties, and lawless idolatry. With respect to these, they are surprised that these Gentiles doing those very things that you used to do, Christian, that you're still tempted to do. With respect to this, they are surprised when you do not join them in the same flood of debauchery. That language being the unrestrained run and outpouring of sin in all its ways. So number one, a decided disciple who has put his foot in the ground and said it is better to suffer for righteousness' sake than to sin. That person looks back on that prior guilt, not with despair and not with dreaming passions, but with regret, covered by the grace of God. Secondly, we receive the reviling of the world. You know that if you rub shoulders with sinners, non-Christians from other religions or no religion, and I pray that you do, as you rub shoulders with them, live with them, alongside them, work with them, and you're friendly with them, and you love them and serve them and generous to them, sharing the gospel, you know that it's not merely enough that you choose your own lifestyle. Right? Everybody says you do you, we won't care, but in honesty, the sinful heart demands and desires that you join me in my sin. That as you separate yourself, Christian, and start living this other life, they're not happy for you most often times. There's always the rumor that goes around, or the reviling or the maligning, that you're some holy one judging me, this is hate speech, you don't like me, or it's not merely enough that you do your own thing. They desire and demand that you join them in their drinking parties. That you affirm their extramarital affair as genuine. That you don't judge me for my lifestyle choice. you don't get to do that. You have to affirm and approve of what I'm doing. That you come and join us in all the sin that we're going to do. That you sign your name on this and join us in this tax theft or dodgy business dealing. Whatever it is, we're all tempted and called by the world not just to do your own thing, but in fact to join them and give approval, as Romans 1 tells us. And when you don't, it's a when, not an if. When you don't, as you stand in your workplace, neighborhood, family, as a beacon of a changed man or woman who does not join them, you receive as Christ did, the maligning, the reviling, the completely false rumors, the insults, the jeering, the mocking, even maybe the physical or social persecution. We receive that and we say it is better to suffer for righteousness' sake than to sin. And Peter throws our mind to the last day. He says, look at verse 5. They malign you, but, verse 5, they will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. They will give an account, not to you. Don't defend yourself. Don't come back with the revilers and the maligning. Don't placard how you're actually a better person than them, and if they were any part of the righteous person you were, they would act more like you. But go on loving, go on gently, respectfully, pointing them to the gospel of Jesus Christ, because it is not you that they give an account to. It's not even ultimately you that they persecute. It's Christ. And his name being reviled, he will vindicate. On the last day it says he is ready at any moment to judge the living and the dead. This is why, he says. This is sort of Peter coming back to our defense. He says, this is why the gospel is preached even to those who are dead. And just like last week, we need to make sure that we don't read that and think that in a post-death experience, it's possible to become a Christian. You might die, get preached to, get saved then. It's okay. No, we die once, face judgment. What Peter is saying here is that the gospel is preached even to those who are currently dead. As in it was preached to them when they were living, now they're dead. We know this because they were those who were justified in their faith when they heard, while they were living, because he says that though they were judged in the flesh the way people are, they might live in the spirit the way God does. Here's what he's saying. Here's the context. Here's how it fits into the context. He's saying, we preach, love, serve, live righteously. Christ does the judging. He does the vindicating. We know for truth on the apostolic authority, we will be vindicated one day. Keep on loving, serving, being generous, bringing them the gospel of Jesus. But the world looks on and says, maybe even back in their days, as they're saying Jesus is coming back soon, and he's going to take us with him, and it'll be glorious, but more and more and more Christians keep on dying at the hand of the wicked rulers. And the Christians keep saying, our God is on the throne, Jesus is up there, he's ruling over us and for us, Nero can't do anything in his Roman Empire, lest God gives it the authority. And Christians keep on dying, getting buried in shallow graves or burned up on crosses. And the world says, I don't think you're right, Christians. It looks like you're losing. Look at all your dead relatives. Look at all your dead friends. They preached this Christ. They were pretty confident that God would protect them. And they're dead. That is what Peter calls, just as Jesus received, being judged in the flesh. Or, an alternate translation, judged according to the flesh. The world looks on in the flesh and sees dead Christians and says, well, it's not all that it was being spoken up to be, right? But we know that those who have had faith in Jesus Christ, been forgiven and saved, have passed into an indestructible life that he called in the beginning, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, our living hope. And they live in the Spirit the way God does, as he says there in verse 6. But we look at our dead relatives, friends, those who have apparently in the flesh, they look like they've lost. Jesus did nothing for them, didn't make them rich, didn't protect them from death. What good is this Jesus? They keep on heaping on the maligning and the reviling, but we have decided, like those who have gone before us and perished, it is better to live for righteousness' sake and to suffer than to sin. And those who have persevered on to the point of death are now living with God. And if heaven could open for a moment and they could tell us anything, it would be Friends, it was better for us that we lived according to righteousness and suffered than that we turned aside to sin. Their testimony there is that to suffer for righteousness' sake and for the cause of Christ is the better way. They have the crowns of glory. They have the gold around them. They have the very presence of Jesus before them, giving testimony to the fact it is better to suffer for righteousness' sake than to sin. That's what Peter wants us to get. He won't do with us not understanding that to the point of changing our life. There's a gentleman by the name of David Jones. You think you know what I'm talking about, but it's not the guy that started the shop, retail. David Jones was a young Welshman back in the early years of the 1800s. He was in a preacher's college, a little school in South Wales, and he was there learning. And one morning, his professor came in, and his professor seemed completely distracted from the lesson. And the men in the class asked the professor what his problem was. 1800s back in Wales. I won't do the accent. I won't do it. But the man says to him, "Look, students, you've noticed I'm distracted. I can't hide it anymore. I was troubled last night in a dream. As I was reading before my bedtime, I was reading a journal about frontier missions. And there was an article in it from a general just off the coast of Malagasy, near Africa. There was an English general there writing back to London for the journal, and in it he was talking about the plight of the people of Madagascar. These Malagasy people, as they call it, they were being taken, entrapped, slaved in their local warring with one another, and then sold to Arabians who would bring them back to the other continent for sale into slavery. Not only that, there was zero Christian witness among the millions of people of the Malagasy. There was no Christian witness. So this general writes back in this journal of the plight of the Malagasy people, how his heart broke for them, and he's a man of the world. He's in civil duties in the army. He can't solve all of this. As this professor read this journal article, he was stirred as to how God might use him to help the people of Madagascar. He opened up to Acts chapter 16 for his evening devotion before bed, and he read the account of the Macedonian call. I'm sure you remember it. Paul is not being allowed to go where he wants to go to preach the gospel. And one night he closes his eyes to sleep, and a Macedonian man comes to him in a dream and cries, "Paul, come over to Macedonia and help us." So Paul went, preached the gospel in Macedonia, and had an enormous, fruitful mission. This professor read that from Madagascar, read that in the book of Acts, and could not sleep. And when he finally went to sleep, he had a shaky slumber. And in the middle of the night, he saw a Malagasy man standing on the coast of Madagascar, crying out, "Send somebody to Madagascar and help us." He was probably a cessationist. He probably didn't know what to do with that kind of dream. But in the morning, he woke up shaken and stirred as to what he, an old man, as a professor, can do to help the entire island of Madagascar. And as the men who were sitting under his teaching that day realized he seemed stirred, they asked him the question, and he told them the whole account. And maybe some of them thought that he was crazy, but with fervor that he was so famous for, he was telling them of the plight of the Madagascar people and what needed to be done. And he ended his little sermonette in the middle of what was supposed to be a lecture with, "Who will go to Madagascar?" David Jones put up his hand, stood, and said, "Professor, I will go." And a friend of his stood up also and made the same declaration. They were then, over a few years, sent as missionaries through the London Missionary Society to Madagascar. But they faced trouble at every single turn. Not just the physical trouble of being a wiry little skinny white Welshman trying to go and survive in the southern tips of Africa. That was terrible. But even on top of that, there was the situational perils and also the armies that were actually opposing them from the island, and even the English people on the nearby neighbouring islands. Here's what happened. David and his friend Thomas, they went up to the general, a replacement general at this time, not the guy who fell from Madagascar. They went up to him and were saying, we want to go to the island with some of your men as they go there to get supplies. We want to go with them so that we can preach the gospel. And every single person they told them on the way told them there is no use preaching to those pagan Malagasy people. They're gone for. They're done for. They're not worth preaching to. They can't learn. Even this general advised them that it will be no good to go there. Don't even try. You'll die from the fever first. And if you happen to survive the sickness, you'll be killed by the natives. No Englishman will ever live on Madagascar. Well, they kept on pushing. What they found out later was that very general, he would have massive loss if the gospel got to Madagascar. Because he was secretly and illicitly and illegally trading in slaves from Madagascar. So, a practice that was already outlawed under William Wilberforce a few years prior. So here's this man saying you won't go, gospel's no good, don't take it, because he had secret dealings with them. And then he even says, I'll read you a portion of the biography. He even says, go and talk to some of the men who work on the plantations, the farmers on this island, who work with people from Madagascar. Go and ask them whether there's any hope in taking the gospel to them. And David told them his plan to take the mission to them. And they said, teach the Malagasy? You may as well try to teach the monkeys in the Madagascar forests. Well, David was taken aback by their scorn for a moment. But then reflected that men who had no other use of the Malagasy than to buy them as slaves for use on their sugar plantations, they were not the best judges of the possibilities of teaching them Christianity. From there goes the amazing account of him taking his wife and newborn child to the island, both of them other than himself, his wife and child, dying within 2 weeks. His best friend arriving, who stood up with him in the lecture hall, arriving with his wife and newborn. All three of them die within 2 weeks. He then being beaten and thieved from as a dying man, crawling to another tribe, trying to get some help, being brought back as a prisoner, mistreated all over the place. His zeal did not finish. And now, among the 25 million people on the Madagascar island, only 220,000 of them live in an area that is untouched by the gospel of Jesus Christ. Sounds like a massive number. It's 0.8% of the population. 99.2% of the population now lives within the sound of a church bell because of David Jones. But I want to take us back to that moment when he realized those slave traders. When he said it, I want to apply his logic to us for a moment. He said, those men who have no other use for the Madagascar people than to sell them as slaves for use on their plantations, they weren't the best judges of whether or not these people could learn Christianity. Why? Because they had a secret, illegal, vested interest in those people not being converted. They wanted slavery to continue for their own riches. They wanted their paganism to continue so that they could take advantage of them. And I want to think of us today. As Peter has been telling us, chapter after chapter, verse after verse, sermon after sermon, suffer for righteousness' sake and take the gospel to your friends, to those who persecute you, to even the kings, as Paul reminds us, to all those in your life, the worst sinners you know. Take the gospel, and you and I we won't suffer, and we don't suffer. And we won't push into those corners for gospel fruit because of the persecution we receive. And as David came to the realization, I think we can come to the realization. Of course, as I keep thinking to myself, oh, they won't receive the gospel. They won't change. And these guys, they won't change their ways. And that group of fellas at work and these crew in my sport team, I just can't preach it. There's no hope for them. These girls at school, these ladies from the workplace. Why do we give in to the temptation to think they're not worth suffering for? I won't preach to them? Because you and I have a vested, secret, illegal interest in them remaining sinners. Why won't we speak up against the sexual immorality of our friends in love and gentleness? Well, because if they do that, I won't have someone to perv on. Why won't we speak up and against the pornography trade and all of the sexual and human trafficking across the world? Because then what will I log into to watch? Why won't we stand up and speak against the illegal or false, dishonest trading in our business? Because we have a profit to be made as long as that happens. Why won't we be honest and willing to suffer like Peter commands us? Because we, like those slave traders, sell the souls of our sinful friends for the secret profit that we can gain. We have to think of ourselves like that David Jones. He's not an anomaly. Those who suffer in the flesh for righteousness' sake aren't an anomaly. They are simply those who have ceased from sin and ceased from trying to take an illegal profit underhandedly from sinners around us. We enjoy our sinful flesh a little bit more when we can sin vicariously through those around us. The call of Peter today is rather than let sin come in, which you live the whole life of that, leave it behind. Rather, suffer for righteousness' sake. Take the gospel to those that need it, and die if need be. The reason we can do that is because Jesus, the great righteous one, he came down for us, took our sin upon himself, and gave us the ability to do what none of us are able even to pretend we can do. Earn God's satisfaction. Earn his pleasure and faith. He, though we were justly condemned, though we should have been demoted to ashes and dust and then swept into hell for further torment, he saw us in our plight, loved us to the point of suffering and death, and did what you and I needed for salvation. He died for us. Friends, all of our sin, whether you're living in it at the moment that you're calling yourself a Christian, whether it's something you're struggling with in secret that needs to be dealt with, whatever it is, Christ died for that sin, washes sinners clean by his blood, and brings us into his family to no longer live the life in the flesh for sinful passions, but to live for the will of God. Can you pray with me this morning as we close our time? Father God, we need to hear what you says to us. And we thank you that you write in your word the plenary, completed, full revelation of God from heaven to us for all time. This is the faith once received for all the saints, and in your word is every rebuke that we need. God, it also brings every promise that we need for hope. You have promised that those who go and stand in that path of the daunting task to live for righteousness' sake, to the contrary of the entire universe, God, every cosmic, angelic, demonic army that comes against us, we defy them in every act of the world and the sinful flesh, even that is in our own body. We defy all of it to follow you. And God, you promise that you will be with us to the end of the age and that your mission will not fail. Even as we heard from the Weaponised Baptist Confession, you will preserve our faith to the end. May your promises, God, please empower us to see the glory of Christ, all that he did for us, and be able to live in his likeness, suffering at the hands of the wicked for your sake, never giving up or retreating back into sin. Father God, that you save those among us today who still live in open sin, who have not yet repented and come to know you in a salvation, freeing, saving way. God, would you please give faith to that heart? Point them to Christ and Christ alone. In him that they stand, complete and forgiven. We love you, Jesus. We thank you.